Okay, John Dove here from the Advocacy Club, and we've just had the May session of our Public Speaking Advocacy Club. So tonight our members have been delivering speeches, and the theme of tonight's session has been the use of notes. So I'm going to deliver some general feedback in relation to public speaking. I will start with general public speaking tips and then focus more specifically on the use of notes. So the first thing I will say is that when you're doing any form of presentation or speech, it's always important to really grab the attention of your audience at the start. And this is where I say it's all about building that rapport. Because if you don't grab the attention of your audience right away, they're unlikely to be interested in the remainder of your presentation. So the best way to do that is to pique the interest of the audience. So one way, for example, could be to ask a rhetorical question, something that gets the audience thinking about your topic. Another way can be to start with quite a bold opening, a bold statistic, something that really makes the audience sit up and think, wow, hang on, we're in for an interesting talk here. So something that really grabs the audience's attention at the outset. Now, within your presentation, people often ask me about humor. Now, I don't think that humor is required in every single presentation. It just doesn't lend itself. But if you've got a little bit of charisma and you can work some humor into a presentation, I think that's a really good way of putting your audience at ease. So you don't want your whole speech to be a comedy presentation, but if you can make the odd point here or there a little bit funny, have a little bit of a lightness of touch, that's one element that can be incorporated just to make your speech a little bit more fun. As I say, it's not suitable for every single speech and you shouldn't do it all the time, but is something that is acceptable, I would say. And one of the techniques that I think is really good for delivering a point is the use of three. Now, I think one of the reasons for this potentially might be, you think about it when you're in school, you learn your 1, 2, 3s, your ABCs, your nursery rhymes, etc. So the use of three is a really good way of delivering points. And we see politicians doing this all the time. A lot of political slogans are generally 3 words because it's a really good way of driving a point home. So, you think about it, you might be, let's say, let's take something really simple. Let's say you were describing a plane flying past and you'd say, the plane was large, fast, and loud, something like that, 3 words, and it's really driven home that point. So I think the use of three is a good way to really describe something and really drive home a point. When you're making any form of presentation as well, if you make one of your most significant points, pause afterwards. Only has to be for a few seconds, 2, maybe 3 seconds. But when you pause, your audience sit up, they take note, they know that you've made a significant point, and it causes the audience to think about what you've just said. Likewise, it might be if you're in a court setting. I know that most of you are either lawyers or aspiring lawyers. You're delivering submissions advocacy to a judge and you've made one of your strongest points. Just pause for a couple of seconds, let that sit in the judge's mind, and the judge knows that you've made a really important point there. During the course of your presentation as well, no matter what type of presentation it is, I think it's always important to try and avoid a monotonous tone. It can be quite easy to deliver a presentation in just sort of one boring, monotonous tone. You can vary your pitch, you can vary your pace, you can increase the volume for certain times, you can lower the volume at certain points. It just, once again, it makes the speech more interesting. And also it causes whomever's listening to your speech to sit up and actually pay attention. So I think that avoiding that monotonous tone is very important. And the last general point I'll make about public speaking here is that when you come to the end of a presentation, no matter what it is, always try and end with something short and snappy and that's going to be memorable. The takeaway message for your audience. So it's almost like a call to action that they're leaving with. Now, in terms of the use of notes, which is what we were focusing on tonight, the first point I will make is that reading from a script verbatim is something that should be avoided, i.e., imagine if you had a piece of paper like this and you're literally just staring at that piece of paper. That's probably something that should be avoided for a couple of reasons. A, you're going to have no eye contact with your audience whatsoever, so there's virtually no rapport. B, you'll be looking down at the piece of paper, so your voice isn't going to carry properly. And C, it just doesn't look right. So there's nothing wrong with having a script. If you're delivering a form of presentation, you can have a script there in front of you. But I think the important thing is to glance down, and you can take things a little bit slower. Say if it's something whereby you've not had much time to practice. So I know that many of us are in the legal profession, and it could be, I don't know, let's say you're in court and you've got a plea mitigation coming up. You're speaking to your client, you're taking notes from them. So you're learning this for the first time as you're taking instructions from your clients, and then 5 minutes later you're off in court. So this isn't something where you've had weeks and weeks to practice. You've got literally a few minutes. So there's always going to be a need for you to be looking down at notes. But what you do is, every sentence or two, you might glance down. Okay, this is my next point. Look up, deliver that point. You can glance down again for the next sentence. Look up. So there's nothing wrong with that. But I'd say just try and avoid having the situation whereby you're completely fixated and looking down as you're delivering that presentation. If you have got something whereby you have been able to practice in advance, you might find that once you've practiced a number of times, you can condense your presentation into a series of bullet points, which makes life easier. So you might have practiced your presentation 10, 20 times. You've been able to condense it down to bullet points, and you look down and the bullet point says paragraph about fruit or whatever it is you're talking about. And then you look up and then you know exactly what that paragraph was all about. You look down, okay, my next paragraph was about televisions. I'm literally just looking around my room for inspiration here. But you look down, look up, and then that's what your next paragraph is about, and you know where that goes. Or it could be something very, very lengthy. It could be a long speech, and you've got that script there to fall back on, but you've practiced that often. You have the general essence in your mind. And if you get lost, you can always look down and glance down at that. Now, sometimes you might be delivering a presentation whereby you'll be quoting from somebody. So, it could be you're quoting from an academic work. It could be you've got statistics that you need to read out. Now, of course, in those circumstances, there's nothing wrong with looking down and for that sentence or two, reading verbatim. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. You wouldn't be expected to remember lengthy quotes that you need to read out word for word. But as a general rule, for the most part, it should be avoided throughout the majority of your presentation. And then lastly, let's say, let's say you're delivering a presentation whereby you're in person and you have physical notes on paper, whether printed or what have you. Think about the fact that you'll need to lay those out on a lectern. So think carefully about, if you have to take them and you need them to go into a jacket pocket or a bag or what have you, think about how you fold the notes and therefore how they'll sit on a lectern. Because the last thing you want is to fold them incorrectly and then they don't sit right and they're flopping all over the place. So think about the practical side of things and make your notes easy to access. So once again, for example, let's say you've got a wide lectern and you might have a series of A4 pages. You can have them on one side and then flip them over as you're going through. So it's nice and easy for you to access and look at exactly what you need to see. So those are just some tips in relation to public speaking and the use of notes, and I hope you've found that helpful.